a commercial beekeeper who started in my backyard and then it got out of control. I keep bees in Sydney, but also on the Central Coast and Hunter Valley. So, and now further afield because of Varroa. So, what I'm going to do is run through spring prep and swarm prevention. Some of you may have seen some parts of this before. There's going to be a lot of new stuff because of Varroa. We're really limited in terms of what we're allowed to do if we're in the purple zone. And there are also considerations in the blue zone. Has anyone got any bees in the red zone at all? I'm putting my hand up because I do.
They're gone now.
They're gone now? Okay. All right. So I'll go quickly through the red zone stuff. Basically, but in summary, if you're in the red zone, you're stuffed. So there's not a lot of swarm prep and spring management. I'll run through it quickly. But yeah, the core of it is that there's going to be, in the purple zone, there should be a few people in the room in the purple zone. Yeah, okay. I'll run through it. I'll run through where it is as well. So if you're unaware of where you are, you'll hopefully work it out soon. So not very clear, but this is DY. This is Normanhurst. And it sort of comes down to sort of Beacon Hill. Down here. Okay? So north of there is the purple zone, red zone, as we discussed this stuff. Blue zone, there are a few things to think about when you're doing things like catching swarms, but I'll run through that separately. But it's more or less business as usual.
Is this area in the purple zone?
We are in the blue zone here. Well, it depends. It cuts the North Shore in half at Pimble. So if you're north of Pimble or northwest of Pimble, you're in the purple zone. South, you're in the blue. Yeah, but it's sort of that blue zone from Pimble sort of comes through to French's Forest. So it's sort of an arc, if that makes sense.
Follow the creeks. Anything government, follow the creeks. Don't follow the streets.
There you go.
Follow the creeks.
That sounds good to me.
There's a boundary.
Yeah, at the moment.
Not streets, don't let them streets, please.
If
Yeah.
you go onto this website, you can type in your street address and it shows you exactly where you are.
Yeah.
You don't have to guess.
But you don't have to guess, but I'll put up the website or I'll direct you to the website. It's at dpi.newsouthwales.gov.au and then you just click on the big banner that says Varroa and the map will come up. Okay? Whereabouts are you? Which side of you?
Gordon.
You're sorry, Gordon?
Gordon, that's up here.
Maybe.
East or west?
East or west.
Well, east you probably have.
Stick around and I'll put your address in for you and we'll work it out.
Yeah.
Okay? Maybe is the answer. Because I'm in St Ives and I'm in the purple. Gordon, you're probably in the purple. Yeah, so consider it, but keep an ear out for the purple zone stuff and then we'll check at the end of it. Alright, so eradication zone. You're not allowed to split. No hive movement. These are supposed to be crosses, but obviously moving from an apple to an IBM hasn't worked out terribly well. You can't harvest honey in the brood box. No frame rate, basically you're stuck. You can't rehome swarms, you can't do anything, except you can add a super to prevent swarming, and you can kill your own hive with DPI permission. Okay, so as a general rule here, what I'll say is if you're in the red zone, call us at the club and we'll give you direction. So in the last 3 weeks, I've lost nearly 200 hives in the red zone. I'm unfortunately very, very familiar with how it all goes down and the process for it, what you can and can't do. You can give me a call, my number's on the club website, or you can just call the club, anyone in the club, and get on to me, okay? And I can help guide you through it. This is the one where we're sort of in it at the moment, the surveillance zone, the purple zone, okay? So the purple zone on this map, as we were talking about, it extends down to Beacon Hill and then through Gordon, through Pimble. Basically, ends of Bunnings at the new Bunnings in Pimble, okay? And forms an arc down to the Bunnings at... We'll just keep going with the Bunnings, right? Yeah, the north of the Bunnings at Thornley, and further south, there's no Bunnings at it's almost...
Actually, the upper northern beaches as well.
Yeah, Macca's at the Macca, well, just use the tradies references, the Macca's at Beacon Hill then. And then across to the beach where you spend Friday afternoons when you knock off early. So, surveillance zone, again, these should be crosses, but that's here we are. So, you can't move your hive without a permit in the purple zone. And you can't move them anywhere off your property. You're not technically supposed to move them within your property either. Where they are is where they're supposed to stay. Okay? And I have spoken to a guy called Brett Carouche, who's in charge of permits for the DPI Varroa response. I've just applied for some permits and he advised me that there'll be no permits issued in the North Shore or Northern Beaches, any of this purple zone you see here, this side of Christmas. So if you do need to move your hives before Christmas, again, speak to me. I can put you in touch with the permit guy, but we might need to come up with other solutions, like potentially, if you're selling your house, we've got members like that, and the only other option is to euthanise the hive. Okay, so they're treating it very, very seriously. This is an important one because a lot of us here will catch swarms and put them in boxes and do that as a community service. You're not allowed to rehome swarms. Okay? You're not allowed within the purple zone. You can't catch a swarm out of a tree. You can't catch your own swarm. If your swarm leaves your hive and goes up into a tree on your property, as far as the law is written, you're not allowed to catch that swarm and put it in a box. Even if you're watching it leave your hive. Okay? You're also not allowed to do hive relocation. So in my work I do Sydney Bee Rescue, which is removing bees from trees and places where they'd otherwise be destroyed, possum boxes, things like that. We're not allowed to do that within the purple zone either. So all feral hives, all wild hives need to be destroyed, including swarms. The fine for not complying is $1.1 million. So, and they're looking for people. So they're issuing compliance notifications. They're not issuing $1.1 million fines at this stage, as far as I'm aware, for swarms, but they are issuing fines. So just be very aware of that. You're not allowed to move apiary equipment outside the surveillance zone. So that's beekeeping jackets and anything like that. You're not allowed to move any of your hive wear off your property. Because that's considered moving a hive. There are some cutouts, some exceptions. So if, for instance, you have hives at your friend's place in the purple zone, you can move them to your extracting shed in your purple zone as well, under the current rules. But the rules are changing, okay? So we need to be aware of what's going on. You're certainly not allowed to move them outside of that zone without a permit, anything there. Now, this is, again, these are supposed to be ticks. What can you do? Well, you can split your hive within your premises. So it may sound counterintuitive with the swarm example that I gave. You can't catch your own swarm, but you can split your hive within a premises. So you can't split it and then give it to a mate, or split it and then move it to another site, but you can split within your premises. Okay? And recombine afterwards, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
And there is the rule that if you catch a swarm, like your own swarm, you're supposed to destroy it.
You are, absolutely. Yeah, within the purple zone.
What's the best way of destroying a swarm hanging off a tree?
Yeah, the way there is only one authorised way that you're allowed to kill swarms as a beekeeper, unless you're a pest controller. If you're a beekeeper, you're allowed to use petrol, like you would with AFB. Okay, it's pretty grim.
You have to remove it from the tree first. You can't kill it in the open air. You can't hit it with a can.
You've got to get it into a box and then kill it.
Yes. Well, you can't. You're supposed to put it in a box. Yes, and then kill it. So, for instance, you're also allowed to put it in a box, move it to kill it. So that is, for instance, if it's hanging out the front of St Ives shopping centre, somewhere public, you can get it into a box, move it somewhere away from people to then kill it. That's a permitted move, but it has to be killed. Sorry, question?
I was just thinking about the bait stations.
Yeah.
So if you don't touch it, they're just counting on it to find a bait station.
There are no bait stations currently within the purple zone.
Okay.
Tricky, huh? Yeah, so it's not going to be affected by bait stations. And bait stations also, so can you see the red purple perimeter there, the boundary? There are no bait stations within 2 kilometres of the red zone edge towards the purple. And that's to avoid people right on the edge of the purple, being beekeepers, having their beehives, which are legally allowed to keep, killed by that bait station. So, yeah, what they're counting on is that people will either kill them or leave them, and most swarms, when left and not captured, will die anyway. Some will survive in walls and trees and whatnot, but most will die.
Now, that capturing of the swarm you use as shopping centre or at school,
Yep.
and you pick it and you move it, do you need to ring the DPI before you take it?
Question mark. Don't know. It's unclear.
That's all right. I'll ring you.
Yeah.
You can do it.
Yeah. It's unclear whether it's considered a hive move. Okay. I would seek clarification.
They clarified that when they came to the...
Oh, they did? Okay, so they clarified that was it.
Move it with the sole intent of killing it.
Then you don't need to. Yeah.
You can't move it with the intent of seeing whether the queen's nice.
Yeah.
You've got to kill it virtually within 6 hours of moving.
Well, it has to be done as soon as practical. I think it's in the order. So, so it needs to be done straight away. And when you do move it within the purple zone, you've got to move it within the purple zone.
Yes.
The other thing to bear in mind is when you do move it, if you put it in a box to move it, that box becomes apiary equipment, which you then subsequently can't move or use again unless you go through a process of taking it to Stereotech, which is again specified under the emergency order, how that needs to be conducted. So basically it's a real issue, and they're still trying to seek guidance on how this is going to be managed, because we don't know. We don't know how it's practically going to work.
Even if that box, say you decide to catch it and put it in a cardboard box.
Yeah, that box is apiary.
That box now is classified as apiary equipment and is subject to all the restrictions of apiary equipment.
It is. And then the question is, how do you dispose of all of these dead bees? It's unclear. There's no guidance again from the DPI whether those dead bees are classified as apiary equipment. It does talk about not being able to move bees within the zone, so we need to have in our minds that it doesn't specify live bees. So you're not supposed to move bees within the zone. So it's a real up for interpretation thing. For instance, if you drop a swarm into a box and kill it, you've still got bees in that box and you can't move it once you shouldn't, according to the order, be able to move it once they're dead. But you can move it while they're alive to a different location to then subsequently kill them and leave them at that location. Yes. Sorry, is everyone following?
It's in the Hornsby shop.
Yeah.
I think is in Beekeepers shop. He's in the purple zone.
Yes, it is, yeah.
Are they able to sell bees anymore?
No. Nor queens.
No queens.
No. The sale of queens, if you need a queen in the purple zone, is governed by a special cutout for queen purchases. And the general rule, as I've spoken to people within the DPI, seems to be if you're buying queen from interstate, you can get them directly. But if you're buying them locally, in the blue zone, you're going to move them into the purple zone, then you need a movement permit.
Purple zone.
Can't buy bees in the purple zone. So there's no purple zone because you can't move bees into a purple zone without a permit. So that's Hornsby won't have queens at Hornsby. Hornsby will have queens in Mount Druitt, and then if you're buying them there and going to move them into the purple, then you need to have a permit. And the permit process takes weeks. So plan it.
And don't ask on the weekend.
Yes. Oh yeah, they're not bad. So that's the understanding for that. So it's really full on. And they do contact tracing like they do with COVID. So if the queen breeder, for instance, if they find mites in the queen breeder, they will contact trace Hornsby, who will have your details, and they will tell them this is the person who bought it, and you will get a phone call, and they'll go, hold on, why have you moved this queen to here? So they thoroughly trace everything in the same way that they did COVID.
Quick random question. This sounds like a really dumb question.
They're all random. Yep.
I've got friends that are really keen on starting up a hive in the purple zone.
Yep.
Would that be a really stupid thing to do right now?
No, it's not. It can be done.
Okay.
But they need to source bees from outside of the purple zone and organise a permit.
And need the permit.
And that's doable because it's if you think low risk to high risk, that's fine. But you need to go through the permit process. It's doable, can be done. But once those bees move into the purple zone, they become purple bees. And those purple bees then all those purple zone bees are then governed by the purple zone rules. Can't move them. You can split them. If they swarm, they're dead.
Yeah.
More? Any questions? Okay. We'll keep going, but there'll probably be more. Okay. So here we go. Swarming the challenge. So this is just to give you an idea of the scale of swarming and the issues we've got. The numbers have changed since I put there. There are 15,156 registered beekeepers in New South Wales. 297,362 hives. Greater Sydney has the majority of the effectively 9,500 recreational beekeepers in New South Wales. And these numbers don't include wild hives or unregistered beekeepers. And if you consider that most of those hives will swarm in a year, and I'm sure all of us are aware of just the number of swarms that we get on the North Shore, it's a really big number.
That 9,500, are they all registered beekeepers? Or
This is all registered.
So there's more than that.
And this doesn't count bees in trees, or walls, or in rock crevices, or wherever they happen to be. You know, when you consider it's pretty much my full-time job to remove wild bees, more or less on the North Shore and Northern Beach.
There's stacks of people keeping bees in suburbia and not registered.
Absolutely there are, because people aren't registering when people buy packages or nukes. No one's keeping records. There's no centralised registration on who's selling what to who, really. So a lot of bees, a lot of swarms, and everyone knows that if you're a beekeeper in the area and people know you're a beekeeper and there's a swarm nearby, it's yours whether you like it or not. People will say, hey, you're a beekeeper and I've got a swarm in the same suburb. It's got to be him. You know, it's got to be her. So swarming is our problem whether we like it or not. Even if we can control swarming in our own hives, as we're obliged to do under the beekeeping code of practice, we are unfortunately going to be contacted about swarming, so we need to know what we can do. Now, swarms in the blue zone, you can catch them, you can keep them, you can move them. So you can do all the stuff you normally do. You have two extra requirements. The first one is you must do an alcohol wash on the swarm to check that it doesn't have Varroa mite. Secondly, you must apply for a movement declaration. Okay, so it's not a movement permit like I was talking about, emailing a guy and then doing a risk assessment on it. This is a movement declaration, which is an automated form on the DPI website. You just fill in the details of where it goes to and from, okay? But as part of that declaration form, you're one, declaring that you've done the alcohol wash.